Okay, good evening, everyone. We have 6 o'clock on the dot here, so we're going to go ahead and get started with this evening's Planning Commission meeting. I've asked Commissioner Wilden to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Wilden. Appreciate you doing that for us. As far as this evening's roll call, I believe we're going to miss Commissioner Hill this evening, but are expecting Commissioner Sprosty Burns. We heard otherwise? Okay, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. Otherwise, we'll note the presence of the rest of the commissioners here this evening. Item number 3 on this evening's agenda is public input. This is time that's set aside for anyone of the public to express ideas, concerns, comments, questions, or issues that are not listed as a public hearing item on the agenda. These comments, we ask, are limited to 3 minutes. Would anyone of the public like to make comment at this time?
Maybe some public input for item number 3.
Oh,
No?
there you go.
Okay. There may be some public input for Still Ridge Plaza, and if so, now would be the time to come up. Okay, that's all. Oh, yeah, okay. I just wanted to give you a chance, so.
As you approach the podium, if you don't mind stating your name and your address for the record, that will help.
Sure. My name is Jill Dusick. I live at 334 East Siegel Lane, Saratoga Springs. I am a resident that is directly behind the Still Ridge development, and I have been watching every day from my office window as the grading gets higher and higher to where now they sit equal to my backyard fence. So the development will be looking over into my little backyard space and into our homes, all those along the fence line. Now, I don't know about you, but I love being in my backyard. It's little, but it's perfect for my needs at this time. I enjoy after work being able to enjoy my container gardening, having friends over, and I'm really concerned about my quality of life now, as well as the other residents, with this development sitting at fence level and right down upon it. I realize that we need to coexist with businesses, but I hope that it will not be at the expense of what we enjoy. I don't want to have to, get off work and go find a place to enjoy sitting outside. I want to be able to do that in my own space. And those are our concerns as a community. Thanks.
Thank you, Jill. We appreciate your comments this evening. Any other members of the public like to make comment at this time? Seeing or hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And we will move to item number 4 on this evening's agenda, a presentation regarding the downtown plan update.
Some of the commissioners have been involved in this process from the beginning. So I just wanted to update you guys as to what's been happening and what the direction is and what it looks like. So as you know, we don't have a downtown. We have grown so fast that we haven't really had the opportunity to build one. That's one of our goals, is to build a downtown for the city. So I want to present you with this. I want to tell you about the process that we went through, some of the things that we discussed, and the direction that we took in producing this plan. It's done. It's ready to go to council, and I just wanted to present it to you before we moved it to council. So next slide. Oh, I can do that. Okay. These are the principles that we kind of used to drive the place that we developed. We wanted it to be the heart of the community. We wanted it to be a flexible space with pedestrian access, walkability, interactive and iconic spaces, something that we can celebrate as a space, something that we can be proud of as a city, and that we can always think affectionately of. It showcases Saratoga Springs and identifies through unobstructed views to the urban center, to the lake. So we kind of put all that together to kind of showcase the city. The signage and amenities will all be the same. They'll match. And the last thing was community convergence. We wanted to create a place to where the community can gather together and share in experiences. So this is kind of what it looks like. First off, the property is located west of Pioneer Crossing and east of Mountain View Corridor. So it's about 244 acres, but by the time you take off Mountain View Corridor and other uses in the area, it's a little less than that, just below 200 acres. In the center is an urban center, which is the purple area that you're looking at on the map. I have a conceptual design that I'd like to show you a little later on in the presentation, but that is kind of what consists of our downtown area with the main street and so on. Associated with that, we've got some box stores that might locate well in the area, as well as a pretty decent-sized retail area. Associated with this, in the blue area, is more of a business park. Uses we hoped to provide there, and of course, business offices are not in demand at this point, but hopefully in the future they will be. But we've had discussions with educational organizations to move a satellite campus here and so on. The orange area is more of a residential area, but the dark orange is more of a residential retail. The urban center is a place incorporated in vibrant, concentrated mix of residential, retail, and employment uses. And the neighborhood commercial is modeled after the American tradition of Main Street and is a place for living, working, shopping. Here's a conceptual design of what we anticipate it looking like. Now, of course, we are not retailers. We don't design retail area, and this is subject to change. If someone comes in and sees that this just doesn't function, this kind of shows what we would like to accomplish with whatever design comes about. And we still want to be able to control that to some point so that it creates a downtown area. Any questions on this slide? Or do you want to wait till the end? I'm easy.
Either way, I don't know if this is the right place to ask it. Are you contemplating like pedestrian zones or?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So we anticipate parking not being in the middle of this area. So we anticipate maybe parking structures on the periphery and parking structures that facilitate more of a shopping center and things like that. One of the worst things that we anticipate or that we see in big shopping areas are these big parking fields. We didn't want to go there. We didn't want to create that. So I think that we'll probably have to participate in some way to make that look better. There's a couple of areas that we kind of used and toured to get an idea of what we liked and didn't like. And those are, we went to Holiday Downtown, we went to Farmington Station, we went to Mountain View Village in Riverton right here. So the core areas, that's kind of what we wanted to follow, but we wanted it to be more pedestrian friendly and have the ability to create spaces that could bring our affection.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next slide. This kind of gives you a down street level of what those spaces could look like. Street space right there on the top left to the next the next two slides, and then the bottom right are maybe a larger picture of what uses could be in those areas. From gathering spaces to food courts to truck vendors to sports activities in the green and things like that. And then the bottom left shows you what a typical street might look like. So the streets, the trees, a rolled curb so that if you want to have the ability to have a parade down the middle of that, you can facilitate something like that that would still allow more people in the area. Okay? And the last slide, we're talking about transportation because we know there are several aspects to this whole project. Transportation has to integrate well and work with the surrounding areas. We don't want to create an area that would create more congestion. We want to have the ability to plan this out right and make the streets flow in a way that would reduce congestion instead of build more congestion. So in the bottom or the left side there, it talks about the main corridors through the area. The downtown area is the, what we'll call an ochre color. And you've got Mountain View Corridor in the blue, and then Pioneer Crossing in the rust color. So we consulted with a transportation engineering firm that kind of went through this whole process with us, led us on what works and what doesn't work. So, and then street level elevations on the next pictures to the right. So, okay, that was the last slide. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain.
Thank you, Doug. We appreciate the presentation this evening. I would turn it over to the commissioners for any questions or comments. Commissioner Wilden.
Yeah, I love this plan. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the work on this. In the last 10 years, we've seen a movement towards online purchases and such, and we've seen a lot of downtowns in the last 30 years really struggle. In the last 10 years, have you seen similar projects that have had great success in the last 10 or 15 years, or is there potential for this to be really a challenge with online shopping competing?
Good question. We followed those numbers, and the numbers as they are now are trending back to retail stores. There are not as many online shoppers than there used to be, although that's still the mainstay of the shopping. But you go to any one of those locations that I mentioned to you, and it's pretty full at any given time, weather permitting, of course. But so the numbers are rising again, and we feel like the mix that, we're having conversations with a couple of developers, and both of them are excited and anticipating the opportunity to look at this project. We have the opportunity here to create an award-winning downtown, and that's the goal. So we don't want to create something that's going to fail in 10 years and we'll have to redesign, because that's been the problem with downtowns from the beginning. Ask Mark.
Great research. Thank you.
Yeah, but that road was only meant for 23,000 cars, and it's hard when it's busy. So,
Anything else, Commissioner Wilden? Thank you for your comment. Commissioner Kilgore.
So this is just personal observation. I've been in Utah now for about 25 years, and Utah County for about 20 years. And I remember when Riverwoods, is it called Riverwoods? Yeah, Riverwoods.
in Orem.
Yeah, when they opened, and it was it felt spectacular. It was a outdoor mall, a lot of terrific shops, Abercrombie and Fitch type of shops and things like that. And it was right in between Orem and Provo, which is pretty high well, it's the highest density probably in as far as population goes for Utah County back at the time. And then I don't know, over the next 10 years or so, the stores left. I don't want to say it failed, and that's why I'm saying it's a personal comment, because I never read any report on it.
Yeah.
But it felt like it failed, and then it had to find itself, and now it is what it is now. And then something similar to, and this is totally different now, in Salt Lake City, the oh shoot, no, I forget. Gateway, that's it, yeah. Where it felt like lots of great shops and stuff, and the splash pads and kids and older people, younger people, everyone's there. And then again, it seemed, now that one is probably because of the City Creek development, but Salt Lake City is such a small city that we could only support one retail center, and I don't know if that's the case, if that's the case or not, but a lot of stores did leave. So I guess going with what Commissioner Wilden was saying, have you looked at the places that did fail in Utah, or maybe not fail, but at least couldn't figure its way? It became something else. I'm not sure still if Gateway is a success or if Riverwoods is still a success compared to what it looked like before. But we're a much smaller community. How do we sustain that? And have you looked at any of that to see if there's some lessons learned from those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. We went through that exercise. We saw so downtowns have a list of 11 things that make them successful. You're missing more than, and forgive me, I don't remember the numbers right now, but if you're missing so many of those items, they tend to fail, or they tend to not do as well as they would with the more of those items. So you look at those items, I looked at Riverwoods, and it's probably location. You don't have You don't have streets that are located, like I-15, for example. You have to go clear up to the east side up against the mountain to get to it. And then you mentioned a couple others. We thought about that. And some of the things that we've done is proposed a mixed-use development with a little higher-end, higher-density residential that would create the vitality and keep the vitality there. Some of the successful communities we looked at, too, that work. I don't know if you've been to Daybreak in the recent years, but it's always vibrant going on. We attribute a lot of that to the office workers in the day, the residential units in the evening, and you've got the whole gamut out there from, well, when it opened up, $1 million house sitting next to a $300,000 house. So it's a wide mix of uses in there. And then we've also included the ability to put in some office space so that we have job creation in the future. So we're trying to create an area that would play on itself, that would cover those three legs of the stool that I always living, working, and shopping in an area. So all three of those are covered in this downtown area, and we went to great lengths to make sure that all of those were covered and that we're covering as many of those points, and we will continue to do that as developers come in and want to change things up a little bit. We still need to follow the baseline of what we're trying to accomplish here. That's the goal.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kilgore, any other comments from the commission? I'd just like to add as well, I appreciate the work that's going into it. You've been on the commission for a while now, and I always think that the worst thing we could do to ourselves is make us look like State Street in Orem. And I think with what we have now, a lot of people feel that just because that's how we're building out, right? And so the wonderful opportunity, I keep telling everyone, is just to wait because the downtown is coming. And I'm so appreciative of the work of the staff to be able to look at what's working and not working, because I worry that, shopping is part of downtown, but it's not the end all be all of downtown. And I think that's where other cities have slipped up at times is, today's Target is tomorrow's Kmart. And it's, we just can't gaze in those crystal balls and understand that. But if we build a true downtown where it's more than just shopping, where it's that place to gather, it's a place to catch a play, a concert, a park, all these other things that build community, I think then we're onto something. So to have that blank slate, to have the city earnestly looking at that is very, very encouraging. And we can have our State Street here on Redwood. That's fine because we need that. But to have that opportunity to create that real downtown is very exciting. So Thanks for the work.
Users are a big important part of it too, because if you have several banks in the area, they shut down at 6 o'clock and you don't see anybody around them. We need users that will be there through the evening too. So.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation this evening. Okay, we will move now to item number 1 under public hearings. This is the Cliff Lake Master Development Agreement located approximately at the southwest corner of Pioneer Crossing and Saratoga. Keith Lindstrom is the applicant.
So a little bit of overview. We previously had a public hearing for the neighborhood plan. Now we're having a public hearing for the master development agreement. Why we didn't have one at the same time is because the master development agreement was not in place. So now we have a draft master development agreement in front of you, and the neighborhood plan is part of the master development agreement. The current zoning is mixed residential and heavy commercial and regional commercial, and it's close to the southwest corner of Pioneer Crossing and Saratoga Road. Here's a kind of aerial view of the master development agreement, and within the master development agreement is the neighborhood plan, which comprises the mixed residential. And then we have the approximate acreages of the zones. Here's just a more detailed look of the zones. So the MDA specifies that it'll be subject to the mixed residential requirements in our Title 19 and our heavy commercial requirements and our regional commercial requirements, and also the neighborhood plan. It also specifies that the developer will install and dedicate to the city all the required improvements necessary to service the property. And here's a little more detail. One of the specifications is to complete the north side of Flotsam, if I'm pronouncing that right, Flotsam Way, the north right-of-way. And then if the drinking water line needs to be relocated, then the developer will take care of that. And the developer will maintain or adequate water through well number 6 that will discharge enough water that it will make it to the Jordan River. And then the developer will be required, as specified by the city, to upsize any improvements as specified in the city's capital facilities plans, impact fee facilities plans, and the master plans. And the developer shall comply with the architectural design requirements as specified in the neighborhood plan and Title 19 of the Land Development Code. So that's a general overview of the master development agreement. The particulars for this master development agreement for Cliff Lake, and I'll be glad to address any questions you might have. And of course, the applicant is here, and I guess we need to open it up for a public hearing as well. So.
Yep, perfect. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the presentation this evening. Would the applicant like to add anything to the presentation?
I'd just like to add that this basically just follows the neighborhood plan that we talked to you guys about a month ago about. It just kind of clarifies a few things in there and, says what we're going to do and what the city's going to do. And basically just, we took it to make it as simple as we could, just to make it transparent for everybody. And it should be a pretty straightforward development agreement.
Thank you. Commissioner Kilgore reminded me I'm not very good at my job. Do you mind stating your name and address for the record?
Right. Keith Lindstrom, Leisure Villas.
Thank you, Pete. Appreciate that. This is a matter of public hearing, so we're happy to open that up to members of the public to speak to this item. Any members of the public like to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and turn it over. Oh, yeah, thank you, Wendy. Did you mind, do you want to read that?
This is from Sue Alexander. She states, parking should be a real concern. I live in the villas at Legacy Farms. We do not allow parking on the streets. They are too narrow to safely navigate if cars are parked on either side, especially considering the age of the residents and diminishing reaction times. Guests may park in the resident's driveway or at the clubhouse. We also have a small parking lot on the east and west sides of the community. When a resident hosts a gathering, there isn't enough parking for all the guests, especially if multiple residents are hosting holiday gatherings. The Leisure Villas fourplex homes provide great floor plans with excellent storage for older residents and those with disabilities. And that's again from Sue Alexander.
All right, thank you. All right, hearing or seeing no other members of the public, we'll go ahead and close public comment and turn this over to comment.
I'd like to hear a response to that particular question from the public. I don't know if it's the applicant or the city staff.
I'm unaware of any parking problems that we've had there. I mean, if you do have, Christmas come around and everybody has family over, you're gonna have parking issues no matter where you're at. That's, a once in a year type event that happens. I've never had complaints about our parking. City of Vineyard actually complimented us on our parking and likes how we've done everything there and basically use us as an example for the rest of the communities down there. So to hear that an area was underparked is kind of surprising to me, so.
And the applicant meets all the parking requirements as far as the city ordinances go, right?
Well, I'll remind you that during the last Planning Commission public hearing, the recommendation for the Planning Commission was to use the parking requirements that are current today. the applicant is proposing that the parking requirements that were formerly in place be used for this application.
And the formerly, is it fewer parking stalls or?
Yeah,
Different location.
yeah, the main difference is that the former code allowed driveways to be used for guest parking. And then our current code requires guest parking to be within 200 feet of the doors.
So the number of stalls are still, or the number of parking spaces is still the same or equivalent, but just where you park is?
Correct.
Okay.
And we have done a parking study or parking lot study to verify that all of our parking does comply with what needs to be for the communities we do.
Okay. Terrific. And then I have a question on the page 7, the 19.04 land use. It says, it's a highlighted comment for land use, mixed use, can comply. And it does say in the highlighted comment that staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend that the buffer be placed on the heavy commercial, a buffer, between for the residences and the mixed use, be placed on the heavy commercial and regional commercial zone properties. Could you show us that so we can see what it looks like as far as what we're recommending?
So this is probably the best illustration that we have in the packet, is showing the neighborhood plan area, which is the colored, next to the heavy commercial. And one of the recommendations during the rezone was that there be an adequate buffer that would be developed between the developer and staff or the city, to have appropriate buffer through that area. But nothing has been particularly specified.
Mm-hmm.
And we are following the city code, because the city code does specify a landscape buffer between the zones, so we do comply with the city code.
Okay, so if the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to follow what the staff packet or what the staff recommends, would that be any problem for you, the applicant?
We prefer to follow city code.
Okay, so when we make a recommendation, that's not specifically specified in the city code. We're making a recommendation for how to do it, right? So it may not, following the city code may not necessarily be the thing that.
Sarah could probably best address that question, if that's all right, Sarah.
That's exactly correct. City code requires 10 feet of landscaping around the rear and side perimeter of parking lots. And so if the rear was to the east, west in this, but to 780 east, then there would be 10 feet of landscaping. Or if it was to the south, then there would be 10 feet of landscaping along Lazaret. We would also require 10 feet of landscaping between sidewalks and parking lots. However, if there's because this is a development agreement, we can ask for something additional than what's in code. Staff didn't necessarily give a specific requirement in addition to what's in the code. So, right now, 10 feet of landscaping would meet code.
Okay, so again, if the packet suggests that we make a recommendation, I just want to make sure that it's something that is workable for the applicant. Or are we suggesting something that's not an issue?
No, they think that meeting code is acceptable. So the 10 feet of landscaping, if for any reason the commission thinks that something in addition to that should be proposed to buffer those uses, then that's definitely a recommendation you can make.
Okay, so I guess I want to follow code and make it as small a burden as possible for the applicant. But at the same time, if we have to, do the buffering, then I guess what I don't understand is the recommendation that's suggested in the staff packet for the Planning Commission to make, if that is in addition or if that puts an extra burden on the applicant, and whether the applicant understands that or not. He's just saying
They
I'll
do
follow code.
understand. If we were to add something in a code, that would be extra.
I think the distinction is that the 10 feet is for parking lot. So if there isn't a parking lot, perhaps, that way a smaller or larger buffer could apply.
Okay. Do you understand what? Okay.
Yeah, mainly our
I
side
don't
is.
know if I understand what I'm saying.
So the applicant's preference is that we don't add anything in addition to code. We do have a heavy commercial zone adjacent to residential, and is something we could ask in, since we're negotiating a development agreement. If we saw the need for more. It's difficult at this time because we don't know what those uses are. You know what I mean? We don't
Right.
know if there will be trucks, we don't know which way the building's facing or anything like that. 10 feet can be enough. Sometimes, you know, if you have loading bays in the back and that's adjacent to residential, even Walmart, we had them screen their loading bays. So at the back of Walmart, you see a fence, you see a screen wall. It's like what's it made out of? Like, I think it's made out of the fake stone. You know, it's made of cement, but it looks like stone. So we had Walmart when they went in, because the back of their building is on a street, not just a fence. You see that as you drive by. So when Walmart went in, there was a requirement to put up a screen wall. So things like that would be additional buffering, you know, if it's going to be the rear of the building and there's going to be loading bays. So in a condition like that is appropriate if that's something that you would like to recommend.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in light of also the public comment that we had earlier about commercial uses really butting up against residential and, you know, privacy and stuff like that. So, I mean, that was one comment, but I'm sure that's a comment that's common.
Right.
Especially, and then when we have a heavy industrial or commercial really close to the neighborhood, I think that we should do something that is, again, within code, but I guess the code says that we need to buffer. The question is, where do we buffer? And
Right.
and that's what the suggestion is, I guess.
Right.
Okay. All right, then, yeah, then I just, my opinion is that I do think that the planning commission should suggest that, and that should be part of the motion, I guess.
I think if we were to add to that, we would add that screen walls be used to screen loading areas, you know, something like that, that would be an appropriate buffer.
Okay.
And our take on that is, you know, the city has a 10-foot landscape buffer for a reason. That's what you guys found was, you know, acceptable as a city. We feel that 10 feet's acceptable for us. We don't feel like we should be required to do anything besides the 10-foot landscape buffer because that puts a burden on us. And in the development agreement, we went back and forth on this, and we said that we want to follow the code with what it states. We don't want to be burdened with something that's not the code. So that's where our standpoint is on that.
No, and I totally get that and totally understand it. It's just that if the code says that you need to buffer, but it doesn't specify, then we have to specify.
It does specify in the code that it's 10-foot
Right, but where?
along the boundaries of the two different zones. So between like heavy commercial and between, well, basically between any of the zones, it specifies that there has to be a buffer. So there will be a buffer around, back to the neighborhood plan.
Yeah, I believe it just specifies around the parking.
So all of that red, go back, Kent. All of that red where it separates, the red line where it separates the white and the community, that will all have landscape buffer on those ends. And then also on the east end where it's a blue line will also be a landscape buffer. So that's what the code dictates, and that's what we've accepted to do.
Can I ask a clarifying question while we're on this, Commissioner Koval? Thank you. So, Sarah, these are some questions for you as well, just to make sure that I understand. So 10 feet of landscape is not 10 feet of landscape is not 10 feet of landscape, right? So I could have a 10-foot strip and put grass on it, and that's 10 feet of landscape, or I could have a 10-foot width and I could put trees piled up next to each other, and that's a totally different landscape, but all within the 10 feet. So is there clarification as to what is required or not required within that buffer zone to really kind of make it a buffer zone? Also, I think we talked, I don't think it was with this applicant, but in a previous applicant, we talked about like berming a little bit as well. And I thought that was appropriate for when we were discussing it with that item. I don't know if that's been discussed here either to kind of help, raise the profile, raise the topography of that landscape buffer, if you will. So do you mind trying to clarify a little bit for us while we're on this one?
Yes, let me pull up code really quick. We don't require the berming in all situations. Let me get to that really quick. Trying to pull it up on my laptop.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but it's kind of pertinent, I
If you
think.
want to ask a few other questions or discussion, and then we can come back to those questions when I've got that up.
Can I just kind of
Yeah.
clarify some of that?
Dana, please.
Our code does require a fence, a 6-foot fence, perimeter fence to separate heavy commercial and residential.
It does, however, there's a road in between.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so if it was lot line to lot line, right.
That would be the case.
But in this
Okay.
case, there's a road, so then that's why
we
it's a
require
question on
Walmart.
what's the appropriate buffer.
So we'll have 10 feet of buffer plus a road that will be in between the two uses?
Right, 10 feet of landscaping at the edge, around the perimeter of the parking lot, and then the concern is just about loading docks and screening those.
And that was my follow-up question. So does the code state specifically that if only the heavy use, the heavy commercial use is buffering the parking lot and not the loading dock? So we're not clear on that is also required around, based on the building orientation of that heavy commercial use. If that is my thoroughfare on the back of the building, there's no requirement for a landscape buffer?
I believe it's between zones, so there would still be a landscape buffer between.
So regardless of how
Yes.
the building itself is oriented?
So that east boundary line, we do have to have a landscape buffer there.
Okay.
At least where it borders up against DR Horton. Where it borders up against the office warehouse, I don't believe, we might have to do one still there, but I don't know if that's in the code that it has to be there. But we are going to do one there.
Okay. If you don't mind, to my original question as well, sorry to interject, Commissioner Kilgore, I'll turn it back over to you if you have additional questions.
Yeah, I guess, so then, if they are following code and putting in all the requirements, then I'm just wondering what the suggestion for this planning commission would be.
Is if we wanted to add anything in addition to the 10 feet. We wanted you to be aware what the code requirement was, and then if you wanted to add anything in addition to that.
Okay, all right. All right, and then, okay, so even though the staff packet recommended the planning commission or suggested that we make a recommendation, as far as what the applicant is intending to put in, does that really help buffer neighborhood, the back of the neighborhood that's going to be abutting the
We don't
the
have enough
development?
particulars at this time. We don't have a site plan to really say, which way the parking lots can be faced, how high it's going to be over the residence, which way the buildings could be faced, where the parking lot's going to be. There's been some innovative buffers that other cities have used that I could direct you to.
And let me just add in addition, so Gina had kind of mentioned when we have two zones abutting each other, that we require a fence in between those two zones. The challenge here, because we have a street, are they abutting each other, or is the street separating them? And so normally, if they were just, backyard to backyard or whatever, or back of lot to back of lot, we would require a wall or a fence. In this case, because of the street, we can require the landscaping, but we don't necessarily, it's debatable whether or not we can require the fence. So, that's the question, is a screen wall in addition to the landscaping appropriate?
It's just hard because we're putting the cart before the horse,
Right.
since we don't have the site plan yet. So,
Right.
yeah, it makes it hard. But I do want to err a little bit, as long as it's within code, although this is a legislative, act, so just err on the side of the residents. That's what I would like to do.
Right. In the case where a master development agreement is, there are elements of the master development agreement that are legislative decision. So normally, when we're looking at an administrative decision like a site plan, we're saying, does it meet code, yes or no? In the case of a master development agreement, this is a time when we can add something that's more than code. So we can't do that in every situation, but we can in this situation.
Right. Okay,
Assuming both parties agree to it, which we don't agree to it.
yeah.
It's an undue burden on us. And we will try to put more landscaping in where we can, but we don't want to be forced to do something that detracts from what the property could be.
Yeah, and again, I totally agree. It's just that I'm also thinking for, what it could be for the residents as well, not just for you. Because that's why we have that code, and that's why we talk about buffering, for that very reason. The buffering is not for you. The buffering is for the residents, the neighborhoods that are nearby. So, okay, well, I think I've discussed that as much as I can. And
Oh, you would need, well, You have to make a motion, you have to agree to that.
Reopen the public hearing. So if you want to wait a moment, we could reopen the public hearing for you.
Okay, and sorry, I just lost my place here. Yes, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Commissioner Mangum and Wildem, you've both been patiently waiting. Why don't we, and that wasn't a comment up for you, Commissioner Kilgore, I was asking as many questions. But I was saying that in light of, why don't we get your comments, and then if the commission is amenable to it, we could accept a motion to reopen public hearing for comment. But Commissioner Mangum, you were next, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I thought we addressed this in the previous, on page 3, under the conditions, it says both parking requirements shall meet the code in place at the time the rezone application was made. And then it also says parking shall meet the code in place as of the date of the neighborhood plan approval. I can't remember which one it should be.
In the, when the neighborhood plan was reviewed, the motion was to meet the code, the current code, not the previous code.
So that would be the number 5 is what it should be, is what you're saying?
Yes.
So we should take out 4 is what I'm, is what.
Oh, sorry. I need to see it. Just a second. Let me see it.
Actually, it should be 4
We
if
would
you're
take
saying.
out number 5 and
Yeah.
keep number 4.
Thank you. That was all.
Thank you, Commissioner Mangum. Great catch there, appreciate that. Commissioner Wilden.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Kilgore, I appreciate your comments there. And I think we need to continue on that thought process. We are not limited. If this was a zoning situation, we would have zoned it different, being that this is a master development agreement. The code it's a lot different. In other words, we can place restriction, and we should place restrictions, because we wouldn't put next to residential heavy commercial. That's not the way we'd organize that. It's not wise use of zoning. So it's very appropriate for us to say, look, if we're going to do this, we need to have, what are we going to do about lighting? So if we have the residents move in and suddenly we have heavy commercial being built, then they're going to line up and be looking at saying, why did you do it this way? And so we need to make sure that we're protecting the residents. Now, if we agree to have the heavy commercial put in first, then people know exactly what they're going to buy. That would be fair, but that's probably not going to be the case unless there's an agreement that that's going to be the case. So I think we need to look at lighting. How are we going to protect the residents from lighting? And that needs to be in the agreement. Trucking, what trucks and the time of day, and they're going to be driving in and driving out. The screening is only a part of that. The residents, will they be notified? Will they be told when they're moving in that this is going to be built right behind their house? Or are they going to be really frustrated with that? So in this situation, we're having heavy commercial right next to residential. That's not the way we usually organize things. So in this situation, we have the responsibility to provide some safety and protection for the residents that are going to be moving in. So I think just putting a screen or a fence is not adequate, but we need to provide some recommendations to City Council are much more restrictive that are not going to put the burden on the residents as the heavy commercial is built.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilden. Those are very thoughtful comments. Appreciate what you've added to the discussion this evening. If the commission is amenable, I'd be happy to accept a motion to reopen the public hearing. Otherwise, we can continue.
Open public hearing, reopen public hearing.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. We have a motion to reopen the public hearing and a second from Commissioner Wilden. Any further discussion on the matter? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Ma'am, if you'd like to come up to the podium at this time, you're welcome to make public comment. We ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And as you come up, if you don't mind stating your name and address for the record, that would be great. Thank you.
Good evening. Sorry, I worked, so I was late. Amber Santee, over on Bridgewater, and I am a resident that backs up to the fence. Now, they're townhomes, so they're not, There's a bunch of us there. But the backyard is something that most people use during the summer, fall, and spring, because it's an extension to their kitchens, so barbecues. Not much of a yard for ball and dogs and that kind of stuff, but people. We did not know a porta potty was being delivered.
I think you're speaking of Still Ridge Plaza.
Oh,
Yeah, we might have you crossed, sorry, and that's not your fault. Are you speaking towards the Still Ridge development item?
yes.
Okay, we're not quite there yet. We did open public input for that earlier though, so I think maybe you could choose to come back to that.
I'm
This-
okay not going back to it because of what I've heard from you gentlemen so far, and I agree with the boundaries.
Yeah, this is an entirely different,
Codes are codes though, aren't they?
this is like the theme of tonight, all right? So you're right on that regard, and I don't blame you for being a bit confused or crossways on it all. This is an entirely different development that we're talking around the buffer zone. However, we've received comment this evening from Jill, I'm sorry, I don't think I have your last name correctly, Dusick, is that correct? Ms. Dusick there made comment as well. It sounds like you're commenting around the Still Ridge development as well, which
Okay.
we've since closed the comment, but are we allowed to open that back up?
No, I'm okay.
Sorry, I know it can be confusing. In this particular item, we're negotiating a development agreement, which is different than reviewing a site plan. So Still Ridge what we're reviewing is different than what we're reviewing with this one. Codes are codes. Once the master development agreement is placed, for this project, we're like 5 levels above site plan, which is where Still Ridge is at. So there are different decisions that can be made at this level than that level, which is why this buffer wall is something we can discuss here. And at Still Ridge, we can still require a fence, so we'll get to that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry for the confusion,
No,
but we're
no.
so glad you're here. Thanks for taking time out of your evening. Okay, we'll go ahead and reclose that public comment then. Kent, if you don't mind coming back up, thank you. I'll turn this back over to members of the commission for additional questions or comments on this application. Seeing none from members of the commission at this time, I think we've had a very good discussion this evening. I think what we're struggling with as a commission, I don't know if you have answers ready yet or not in terms of what does landscape actually mean, like a 10-foot landscape buffer actually mean, or what we might be able to require around that. But I think if I were to pinpoint a couple of themes around the discussion, it would be to understand maybe what that means and what may be asked in addition to that. And then also to Commissioner Weldon's comments around thinking even a little bit more downstream in terms of lighting and other things. Maybe, Sarah, if you'd like to address some of those thoughts for us.
Yes. So we do have a few sections in the code related to buffering. We probably have 3 or 4 spots in the code that talk about buffering between non-residential family. We do need fencing or screening between those. In this particular case, we have a street in between. That's the challenge we're faced with, is that impact the interpretation of the code. And then landscaping, you're right. If landscaping can be xeriscape, it can be trees, it can be grass, it can be buffers, it can be shrubs and bushes. Our code says landscape buffer, but it doesn't necessarily get into the details of what has to be in that buffer. And then as far as lighting, we do have a pretty detailed lighting code. And in our lighting code, the lights have to be full cutoff, meaning they're directed downward, not outward. And then we also have maximum brightness levels. So you can't exceed, you can't put in really white, bright lights in those fixtures. And then at the property lines, you can't exceed a certain amount of crossover. So we do have a lot of code requirements in place when it comes to lighting to help protect situations.
Do you feel, Commissioner Weldon, that helps address some of your concern?
Yes, I do. Do I need to turn it on?
Don't push the button after I push it. All right, there you go.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. Also, what about the usage of the buildings, meaning the time of day, trucks coming in and out? We'd hate to see that trucks coming in and out all throughout the time of the nights and things like. Is there anything that regulates that?
No, there's not. We don't have a hours of operation limitation in the code.
Okay, is that something that could be put in the developmental agreement?
That's a good question. I don't know if our attorney knows the answer to that without doing further research.
Yeah, I'd definitely have to research that a little bit better to give you a certain answer question.
And I am just getting, I mean, because I mentioned screening is in different parts of the code. So it does read non-residential and multifamily, fencing and other screening materials for multifamily, residential, commercial, or industrial projects must receive approval by the land use authority through the site plan review. In addition, the following criteria shall apply. So we do have additional things in the code that we can look at during the site plan process. And we look at compatibility of the fencing and the intensity of existing and surrounding uses. And then that would be up to the city council. So there are some additional restrictions that we can apply at the site plan level once we have more details about the type of use and the truck and, truck use, truck trips and loading docks. So, sorry, I wasn't quite there when you asked the question, but looks like we have a few more things in the code that can help when we get to site plan.
Okay, so we have some tools that we can use in the next time this comes to us then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Weldon. Commissioner Kilgore.
So as it's highlighted in the staff packet, if we were to say, and Planning Commission recommends that the buffer be placed on the heavy commercial and regional commercial zone properties. If we said that, is that enough guidance for the city council or for staff, just as to what we are asking for? Because I'm just going right off of what the highlighted comment is.
Yeah, I would just say you could recommend, that's a hard one, right? Because we don't know those details, so it's just a hard one to answer. But this section of code will allow us to look at that further with the site plan. So I think we'll have the 10 feet, and then we can look at other proposed buffers in terms of compatibility with surrounding uses.
Okay, so that statement, well, that's not in the condition, is it? I didn't see it.
No.
Yeah, so adding that would be a new condition.
Well, my comment, Commissioner Kilgore, is that's already a requirement for what's up there now. I mean, we already are required for that landscape buffer. The question is, do they have to do anything in addition to the 10-foot buffer? The applicant would say no, and the city is saying, well, maybe we need to think about something in addition to.
Then this is not enough. So it would be like just a suggestion that that the staff take a look at what other areas we can do without overburdening the applicant. I mean, I don't know. It just seems so
Yeah, but they don't want to.
abstract.
Yeah, it's just a hard question to answer. I think we can make a recommendation and let the city council decide. It's hard to know what specifically we should require at this stage.
Yeah,
I mean, you can definitely make a recommendation for, trees and a wall if screening areas or parking lots or truck traffic is adjacent to the residential.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Commissioner Mangum.
Thank you. I think I'm in favor of them following the code. I don't want to put additional stress on the applicant, but I do think that a sufficient buffer is needed. So, like we've pointed out, what is the buffer is the question. Is it a nice tall wall? I think that's the important thing in my mind is to have a buffer, but not require them to do more than the code. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mangum. Commissioner Mann.
Thank you. I just want to go on the record to say that I'm in agreement with my fellow commissioners, particularly Commissioner Wilden and Commissioner Kilgore. I believe that we need to err on the side of our future residents and the homeowners here in our city. And, I believe that it's some level of an adequate, very sufficient buffer zone, whether that be, mature trees that are tall enough to help block whatever's going on, whether it be trucks going by, lighting, whatever that may be, just to make it more beautiful for the homeowners. We have a beautiful city. We have people who want to live here because of its beauty. And I don't know that it's going to be helpful to build a beautiful development that just looks right out at a road and a development. I think that we have an obligation to our citizens to think on this more seriously, and perhaps we can research and look into other developments who have similar layouts, similar situations, and what they've done with their buffer zones.
We've got one more comment. So we got Larry Lindstrom here. He's a member in this development as well, and he has a comment that he wants to make on that.
Hold on 1 second, if you don't mind. Just Commissioner Mann, would you like to add anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We welcome the comment from the additional applicant. If you don't mind stating your name and address for the record, that would be, thank you.
My name is Larry Lindstrom, 1923 North 300 East. I've done quite a few of these office warehouse buildings, and so part of this, I've been involved in the development of this, from day one. And when we met with staff here in Saratoga Springs, they keep bringing up the Mill Pond kind of development in Lehigh, where everything's finished up really nice, where they got the good street feel and everything like that. So typically, the usage and stuff we get in buildings like this, it's, the heavy trucks and stuff, from what we've built, we don't get that much. We're not kind of geared for that around here. We're more geared for, for the smaller stuff. Typically by the street, we want to have the really nice facades on the buildings and have them look really nice. And so the buffers, the traffic or anything that you're talking about is in the back. It's not next to the residential. So the whole idea is to have something that's very attractive. We're really concerned about, kind of building something. I mean, the reason we develop is because we want to build something really pretty in the city, and that's something we can drive by and be proud of. And if you look at the projects we've done in the past, that's kind of the way we do everything. We over-landscape. We tend to make things really nice. But as far as usages and stuff, we can't really say we got to quit it. Nobody can be at 6 o'clock because we may have we may have the pottery people making stuff. We may have the tumbling people out, tumbling. This is really, there'll be neighborhood stuff in that here. So it's really, there's going to be a lot of the uses of this type of building are going to be for the people, for the local people and stuff. So it's going to kind of be, it's going to be active at the night, but it's going to be, the street appeal is going to be beautiful. And we've got to sell the units around here. And part of them will be, there's an apartment next to it. We're not going to do something ugly that's going to make so we can't rent an apartment building. And, it's all about marketing. We have to have it has to all look pretty, else the whole project doesn't work. So we understand your concerns and stuff, but that's not the direction we're going. We're trying to make something that the city will be proud of and we'll be proud of. We kind of develop. I'm at a point in my life, I develop for fun more than develop for the money. I've done enough development that I want something to look really pretty. And so that's kind of how we're all geared. And we want to follow code. We want to do what's right, but we don't want extra burdens placed upon us. It's just not right. So that's kind of our feelings on it.
Appreciate the comments. Thank you. Would anyone else from the commission like to add anything? I'll just make note that I think I tend to lean towards some of the directions, Sarah, that you gave us a moment ago in terms of once a clearer picture is in place and we have a site plan, that's when we are taking appropriate actions and have come to a better understanding of what may or may not be. I think that's part one for what's going on in my mind. And part two is perhaps we've identified an area in our code that we want to pay a little more attention to and perhaps come with some amended changes around what does landscape buffer actually entail. And maybe perhaps even in these instances when we are now as a growing city butting up against some of these varying uses, And they are varied uses when you think of a residential, regardless of the density, up against a commercial application in that regard. We all want what's pretty, but it's really hard to define what pretty is between you and me.
We tend to have a different opinion, the city and us, sometimes.
We can. A lot of times we agree, but
But they typically love it when it's finished.
I know what's pretty and cheap is grass. Let's be honest.
Grass isn't pretty.
Okay, rocks and a couple bushes that die, that then you're not responsible for.
Well,
And I'm not saying this is what you would do, sir, by
you
any
can
means.
go, I mean, we've been developing for 20 years. You can go
I
back and look
understand.
over any of our projects and see how the landscaping looks today, but landscaping is marketing. I mean, pure
Understood.
and simple, that if you're landscape, strictly from a business point of view, you have to have beautiful landscaping to have a successful business.
I understand and I agree with you. I am not so much commenting on for your situation as much as a situation for the city where perhaps we've identified an opportunity for the city to just get better is where actually I'm going towards all this. So appreciate your comments on that regard. Commissioner Wilden, you jumped in and then jumped back out. Would you like to make a comment?
You bet. And I appreciate the comments you said, and we look forward to seeing this good development that you're planning on that will fit well in our city. What I have seen is if the economy changes and you sell it to another developer, and suddenly we have heavy commercial that's next to a resident, and then we have residents lining up going, why did you do that to us? So we have to take stewardship over the zoning requirements, and that's why we don't put heavy commercial right next to residential, except in certain situations like this. And that's why we're given flexibility to say, hey, let's make sure we have landscaping or buffers that are going to meet the need and not create a problem for the residents. So, my recommendation would do where you were heading and recommend to the city council that they strongly consider putting additional measures in place to make sure this happens. Now, we don't know what those measures should be at this point, but to make sure the city council knows that we have a concern and that we recommend additional measures that don't, add heavy burdens, but protect the residents.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilden. Anything else? Thank you.
Can I add, before you make the motion, you might be getting close, number 4 and 5, number 5 says meet the current code when it comes to parking. And then number 4 is the one you recommended against when you did the neighborhood plan. I think I said that wrong.
Yes, it
The
is.
opposite last time. So number 4 is the one that you recommended against last.
So we are recommending to remove 4 to keep 5.
Right.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the discussion this evening. This is why we come to these meetings, and this is why we all want what's best, including the applicant, the planning department, and the commission here. Sarah, the last question I'll have for the planning department is, do you feel like once we get to site plan that you'll be able to have, I think it does a couple of things. One, it gives us a little more time to continue the discussions offline between the planning department and the applicant. Also gives us an opportunity, as Commissioner Wilden noted, to perhaps make a note in the motion that I hope will come forward to note that for the city council as to the sentiment, generally speaking, of the commission. And then the last thing I want to ensure is that in that site plan process, does the planning department feel like you'll have the adequate tools available to reach a resolution that would be amenable for both parties, for the planning department and for the applicant? Meaning that you'll be able to
There are a
really
few things in the
orient and
code
move
that will
things.
help.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. So with that, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to the City Council to approve the Cliff Lake Master Development Agreement located at approximately 900 East Pioneer Crossing with the findings and conditions in the staff packet. Also, to strike the condition number 4, since number 5 will, is the condition that we prefer. And also to request that the staff work with the applicant to make sure that the buffering is placed on the heavy commercial and regional commercial zone properties, and do what's appropriate to consider the neighborhood that's next to it, because there's no one representing them unless the staff takes that. And to strongly recommend to the city council that that's also considered. But again, working with the applicant.
Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner Mangum. We have any additional discussion on the matter? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time this evening. We appreciate both of your willingness to come up here. Thank you, Kent, as well, for your time and preparation on this matter.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move into the business items for this evening. Our first item is the Drift 2 sale. This is a Class 3 home occupancy located at 628 North Fox Circle. Teresa Anderson is the applicant.
Commissioners. So this is Class 3 because they're asking for, so in a Class 2 home occupation, you're allowed up to 16 students or people coming to your business in a day. They're asking for up to 25, and so that's why this is coming to you guys. It's a swimming school. They're going to be providing water aerobics and swim classes, 1 to 4 students a class with up to 10 classes a day with a maximum of 25 students in a day, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And everything, all of the business happens in the backyard. The only part of the house being used is they have the restroom right there in the back. You go through the back door and get in there. They have a traffic plan showing just coming in, going through the circle, dropping off, and then taking off. And then they'll have the staggered times for lessons, so you don't just get all the congestion in the neighborhood. And they have 4 additional parking spaces on the driveway as well. Do you have any questions?
All right, thank you, Kendall, for the presentation. Is the applicant present? Would you like to add anything to the presentation this evening?
Sure.
Thank you. As you come up to the microphone, if you don't mind stating your name and your address for the record, we would appreciate that.
It's Teresa Anderson, 628 North Fox Circle, Saratoga Springs. So I am here. I'd like to give the community the opportunity for some lessons, whether it be children, adults, even specializing with adaptive lessons for those that are in special needs. So that's really all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for coming this evening. Turn it over to members of the commission for any questions or comments. Commissioner Kilgore.
I want to ask the applicant questions. Yeah.
If you don't mind, you can actually have a seat right here.
So this is a administrative process, and I always ask the questions. Does the applicant agree to comply with all the conditions in the city planning staff report?
Yes.
Okay. And I also want to ask, what sort of like safety precautions do you take for, if there's an accident or problems? Are you trained in that, like first response, and also are there safety equipment or things like that?
Yes. So we have buoys, we have ropes, we have all those, and then of course 911 would be called if an accident. We have insurance.
And I'm just assuming that you've done this kind of thing before.
Yeah. So I have over 20 years experience.
Okay. And so so as far as the safety guidelines go, is there a particular guideline or like a city code, or what do you follow in order to make sure that everything there is, that everything that needs to be there is there?
Well, we have signage up inside the backyard. There's also, I think pretty much the signage would do the job. I don't really know what else to tell you about that.
Yeah, just wondering. So I guess you're following all the relevant or whatever requirements exist, which may not be, which may not exist in this situation, but you are following all those.
Yes, I am following.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks, Commissioner Kilgore. Any other additional questions or comments from members of the commission? Commissioner Mann.
I just would like to say that I think it's wonderful that we have a home-based business that's offering these services. We have a giant body of water in our community, and we all know that every year people drown out on that lake. And I just think it's fabulous. I see no reason why we shouldn't send this up to City Council.
You guys are actual the approval authority on this one?
Oh, well, all right then. I approve.
Hold that thought, maybe, huh? Thank you, Commissioner Mann, for your comments this evening. Any additional comments from the commission? Otherwise, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission approves the requested Class 3 home occupation permit for Drift to Sale located at 628 North Fox Circle with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
He beat you to the motion.
Sure did.
All right. Well done, Commissioner Kilgore. We have a motion from Commissioner Kilgore. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
There we go. All right, Commissioner Mann with the second. Do we have any additional discussion on the matter? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, and thanks for coming in this evening. Kendall, thank you for your work on this. Okay, we will move to item number 2 under our business items this evening. This is the Saratoga Dignity Plat Amendment located at 675 West Cottage Drive. Adam Lambert is the applicant.
Okay, so this is just over here off of, I guess it's 1400 North. Is that it, 1400 North? Yeah. So what's going on with this one is they're essentially, all they're trying to do is do a mirror image of how the building is now. It doesn't affect it affects the open space in that it puts it in a different place than what's already approved on the plat. So it doesn't increase it, doesn't decrease it. Like, it's the same exact amount of square footage for everything. It's just literally the orientation is flipping the opposite direction. And because it does, the common area is a blanket utility easement, you guys are the approval authority on this as well. So that's a better picture. So on the left is what it is, on the right is what they're trying to do, or wanting to do, and that's no other changes. And do we have any questions?
All right, thank you, Kendall, for presentation here. Turn it over to the commission for any questions or comments. And is the applicant present this evening? Would you like to add anything to the presentation?
No, all we did was a 180.
Okay. Commissioner Wilden.
Oh, simple question. How does it change the open space? I just wasn't.
Just the location of it. So if you go back, yeah, the pathway going in is really all it's doing. It's putting that from there onto the other side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilden. Anything else? All right, it's Commissioner Kilgore.
So why was the original orientation planned as it was, and why change it now?
If you'll state your name and address for the record as well. Thank you.
Julie Smith, Orem, Utah. I don't know the reason for them switching it. It had, I guess, architecturally the reason. So I'm just facilitating it being done.
Okay. Does it change anything for the residents? Do they gain or lose anything? In
No,
respect?
these aren't sold or yet. They're still being built right now.
Okay, so they'll just be there when they come and buy the property, so it doesn't really affect anybody at this point?
No, so yeah, so what that little key is for is the people who own these, a nurse can come in and bring them medicines. So that is a door for the nurse to come in and give them their medication. That's the sole purpose of that.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Any additional comments or questions from the commission? Hearing none, I would love to entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that the Planning Commission approve the requested plat amendment for Dignity Care Neighborhood Amendment located at 651 West, 652 West and 674 West Utah Cottage Drive with the findings and conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilden. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Mangan. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any additional discussion on the matter? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. We are now on to item number 3 of the evening, which is under the business items, which is Still Ridge Plaza Lot 3 site plan located at 369 East Crossroads Boulevard. Eric Wolf is the applicant.
Okay, the applicant is here tonight, and this is Still Ridge Plaza Lot 3. So Lot 3 is really the combination of multiple lots. Previously, there were 5 other lots there, and so they've combined them into one lot for the sake of processing this site plan. And so there are actually going to be 7 buildings on site. This is located on the corner of Crossroads Boulevard and Riverside, 369 East Crossroads Boulevard. This is a picture of the site plan, so you can see the buildings there. And so that bottom right, that's not part of this. That was a previous site plan that came through. That's Lot 7, and that was previously approved. And then you can see in the middle there, that's Tommy's Car Wash, which is being built right now and has been approved. So just to kind of give you a frame of reference. So to the north is Crossroads Boulevard, to the south is residential. This is their landscape plan that they've submitted. It does meet all of our code requirements. It should be noted that this development it's in the regional commercial, but it's also in the gateway. So as part of that, you'll see on the bottom screen here that they have created an elevation that kind of gives you an idea of what you'll look at as you come into the city. They have a sign, they're proposing a sign that says Saratoga Springs, and then it has kind of a plaza there on the corner with a flagpole. And then the buildings, as part of the gateway overlay requirements, they're required to add additional windows on the buildings, up to 50% transparency, and so they've done that. You can see that here in the elevations. Here's some renderings of those buildings. The materials and other architectural requirements do meet our code. And so we've received some comments tonight on this development. There are some residents who are concerned about this. We've received a number of emails, as well as we've had residents show up here tonight concerned about it. Some of their concerns, include the lighting, the sound, drainage issues, as well as security. And so city staff was aware of these. We met with the developer on site. We went and shared with them the concerns of the residents and tried to work out a solution. So as far as lighting goes, they were required to submit a photometric plan. As Sarah mentioned earlier tonight, we do have lighting requirements that require lighting to be directed downward. You can only have so much light spillage at the property line. And so their light plan, their photometric plan did meet those requirements. As far as drainage issues, we've had a very wet February and March, and so there were some drainage events where, as they were working on grading the site, some water from the snow melt off drained into people's backyards, and so there was concern about drainage. The developer has since put in like a berm to keep the water on site as they continue to work, and then as the site is developed, they've engineered proper drainage for the site. They'll have storm drainage that meets our city requirements. As far as kind of screening, we've talked about screening tonight, and so in our code in 1906-10, it states that that a wall or fence is required in between a residential and a commercial site, and so the commercial site is required to screen its use from the neighborhood to the south. And so the developer, we met with them, and they've looked at the site. We walked it with them. We looked at how, potentially residents could be affected, headlights could shine into residents' homes and things like that. And so they're understanding, and so there will be a fence and or wall that will screen that type of light, headlights and stuff shining into residents' homes. And then as far as, there's been some security concerns about the south property line. Just go here. So on the south here, there is a kind of a landscape buffer in between the two zones. One of the particular things about this site is that it is actually a higher elevation than the residential down that's just to the south here. And so they sit up higher than the houses to the south. And so because of that, there either has to be a retention wall or you have to kind of grade it in a way that it works. And so the developer has shared with us a proposal that they will have a combination of a wall and then a sloped grade that kind of goes down to the residential. But the idea is to try and create it so there's not a weird, awkward kind of no man's land in between this development and then the homes to the south, where you have this awkward space in between a retaining wall and a fence. And so their proposal is to kind of grade it more of a slope so that we don't have just sharp drop off, and then they would put the screening up on top of that near where the drive-throughs are.
Just a little bit while Austin's on this topic. Well, I'm just going to show some photos. So you can see this is the townhomes here, and then this is the existing fence, and then the site, as you're heading west, has had elevation change increase. There's a retaining wall planned in this location. So the concern from the residents here is you do see drive-throughs on the back side of the development. And then the buildings are higher than their properties. The concern is headlights, noise from speaker boxes for drive-throughs, and lights from the buildings. And let me just give one other photo that was submitted to us, just a second. And this is from one of the residents from their window, their upstairs window, and that kind of gives a perspective of, when there is a car in the parking lot or in the drive-through lane, the change in elevation. And so that is what was discussed when we met. We received, I believe it was 7 emails from residents next to this property, and we just want you to be fully aware of the discussions, and then that's what the residents are commenting about that are here. Their concern was, will any of this be screened? So that's the main concern, and so you'll hear that from them, or that's what you're hearing from them. And I wanted to provide these photos just to give you a visual of what their concerns are. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
I just wanted
okay.
to offer that.
Yeah, so from that last picture that you kind of saw where the steamroller was there, so they're proposing to put kind of like a fence right there. So let's say if that was a drive-through, they would have a fence there or a wall that would block the light from shining into people's homes. So it is adjacent to a residential zone. However, this is zoned commercial. This is what it's been zoned as, and so they are developing this completely within our code, within our regulations. They're not doing anything that they can't do within our code. But they understand the concerns of the citizens at the same time. So, and then I think they did mention that they will try to work on the speaker boxes. We did mention that concern to them, and they would try to have those directed so they don't face people's homes on the drive-throughs. Overall, as far as the checklist is concerned, that we didn't have any do not complies or can comply. So they met our requirements as far as our checklist is concerned from the planning department. I think that's about all we have to say. They do meet our parking requirements. They exceed our parking requirements. So there's 177 stalls required, and they've provided 191 stalls. And then, yeah, I think that's everything that we have from staff. And then we do have some recommended motions. I can't control the slides anymore, Sarah.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, let me get to that.
And she's
There you
so
go.
rudely interrupted with this visual.
Yeah.
Actually, those are very helpful. Thank you, Sarah.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, us for presentation this evening. Is the applicant present, and would you like to add anything to the presentation? As you come up, if you don't mind stating, as you sit down, I should say your name and your address for the record.
So my name's Eric Wolf. I reside in Draper. One of the owners on the project. We have our developer here as well as our engineer and architect if we have to answer any of those type of questions.
Devin Hatch. I reside in 691 West Lehigh. So I'm one of the owners as well. So.
Great, thank you. Thanks for being here tonight to help answer any questions we may have and to be a part of the presentation. We appreciate your time. I'll turn this over to members of the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Kilgore.
Thank you for such a clean application. After seeing the city's application last time, you guys, such a, not very clean, and you guys just are very clean. So at least as far as meeting code and everything, yeah, totally, thank you for that. Of course, there are, other concerns as well, but I do want to ask though, it is an administrative action, just to get it on the record, does the applicant agree to comply with all the conditions in the city staff report?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That second picture that Sarah showed, the one with from the second floor, if you could
Do
show
you mind,
that.
Sarah? I think those will be instructive.
Let me bring that back up there.
Yeah, that one. Now, you mentioned that, there was some discussion of building a retaining wall or a fence. Where would that retaining wall, is that the retaining wall that we're looking at, the brown dirt, or, where would that go? Because if it's in the lower part, then obviously it won't do anything for the second story views, but is it above that, where that, I don't know if that's a tractor or what, but yeah. Where is the discussion right now?
Do you mind if I let the applicant answer?
Yeah,
that?
of course, yeah.
Well, currently the wall is designed 10 feet off this fence. So about basically in the middle of this picture you're looking at. And then from then it would slope up. So you have this, that's where the space was created, this weird awkward space right there. If we were to put a barrier on that side, then it creates a corridor that's deep. So we met and we agree with, the residents that, those elevation differences make it awkward for the cars and also for the people in the drive-through lane. We don't want them to look over and see into someone's house. So we came up with the idea and agreed that we would move that wall over up to the fence and retain right to it and slope off of that and then put our barrier fence up on the highest point of the slope so that it was essentially a true 6-foot barrier on our side of the property, not their elevation, if that makes sense.
Right. And then, okay, so that helps a lot because then you don't have, okay, now I understand what you're talking about, the dead man space there. But then you still have the retaining wall. I guess it's still your responsibility to maintain any weeds and stuff that grows on the retaining wall.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Okay, that makes it a lot clearer. And that's actually all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Commissioner Mangum.
Thank you so much. So, yeah, I think the only concern would be from the homeowners, but if I understand you correctly, you're saying from the level of where that tractor was, that's where the fence will start, and it'll go 6 feet from there? Because that would take care of those car lights. They wouldn't
Exactly. That's why we moved it over there. And in that other picture where the compactor was, that would be the elevation of where the fence would be.
So from that level, 6 feet up. Yeah, that'll take care of the car lights, so that's great.
And it will help with the sound as well.
Exactly.
It'll be right close to that as a sound buffer too.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mangum. Any additional comments from the Planning Commission? I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. We appreciate you meeting with residents and doing your best to work with them. It's difficult, I think, because even with the strides you're taking, now, at least on the top floor, there, it appears that at some point they had a view, and now the view will be another fence, if that makes sense. So that to me is super difficult, but you have your rights, they have, they have their property as well, which is always a tough thing, which comes into conflict here as we discuss these items. Can you help me understand, and maybe that helps further the discussion as well, maybe no one else is thinking about it, why did we have to raise the grade so far here? There's a couple ways to do it, right? So we're probably trying to match grade off of the entrances, right? Is what would be what I would guess, but oftentimes you'll come into a parking lot and go down a little bit to find a grade as well. So I'm just kind of wondering where the engineer, and if city engineering or whatever in the discussions that you all went through or what we may have required, I just trying to understand if a water table was an issue or if, meeting grade was an issue and how we came to the conclusion, because that's a lot of fill, essentially. So I'm just trying to help understand the background, if you don't mind giving some context.
Oh, no problem at all. Yeah, this particular lot slopes considerably from Crossroads down, and in order to make it even work, we already are coming in at quite a good steep slope off of the road, but it's so large to get from one side to the other that the difference, we are trying to balance it out so that it's not just a steep drop into the project. Unfortunately, this portion is the lowest end of it. In fact, as it goes further to the west, it improves, and the fence lines actually, they match up. So it's just this section of the project on the low end where we...
How big of low end are we talking about here? I mean, that looks like a fairly large stretch along the back of those.
The wall up against the fence is only going to be 4 feet tall, and then it'll slope up from that. So what you're looking at here, there is a berm here that is higher than it will be because we're trying to hold back water right now currently. So that will get cut down a little bit. It won't be quite as high, but we're probably going to be sloping it up another 3 or 4 feet from the top of that wall as well to get up to that grade.
Okay, and again, I understand this is all about drainage, slopage, and trying to make things work between, obviously, your rights on this property and what we have existing as well. Have we, and it may be in the conditions, I may have missed it this evening, so if staff can help me, or applicant, if you can help me, have we come to any sort of agreement of what the fencing may be made out of? What potentially will these good folks be looking out at their back door?
Yeah, that's not in the motion tonight. So the motion is that they have to have a wall or fence on top of, to buffer. Let's see, where is it? A fence or wall shall be installed on top of the south retaining wall to help screen potential light and noise from the adjacent residential development as necessary. So we haven't specified. Our code does say that it can be a fence or wall. So obviously, like a vinyl fence would be one thing, and then a more solid wall might be different. Might have.
And I don't know what the right answer is to the question, and I'm sure people have feelings about that as well. But if I were to live there, I don't know if it makes a huge difference if I'm staring at a vinyl fence versus a concrete slab, but I think it kind of does. And so I don't know what the right answer there is. At least I know, like UDOT, for example, when they have to build a sound wall, you see decorative work being done to try to ease the eyesore, if you will. And we're essentially eliminating some of that ambiance that existed in these backyards, and so things that we can do to mitigate that. This is also reflective of our previous discussion, right, around these landscape barriers or what we might be able to do or not do. So does this fall within that previous discussion that we're talking about as far as the zone butting up together? Because this is not heavy commercial, right? So we don't do we require that buffer?
We do, yeah. So yes, it's 19.610, and I can just read that code, or do you have it ready to pull up on the screen? But yeah.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. Yep.
My mic. I just wanted to comment that we can require a fence or wall. Our code doesn't say that we can specify a sound wall. We would, you know what I mean? So that's a predicament that we're in. I think that some of the residents have expressed that they would like us to require a sound wall. In the earlier application where we were looking at negotiating a development agreement, that's a different topic. When we're looking, and that's a legislative decision. In this case where we're making a decision, does it meet code or not? We have we can require a fence or wall, and so the noise walls that UDOT do, I mean, those really get into how do you retain wall, or
Right,
how do
and
you,
I don't mean to like
balance noise.
That's what I was
Right,
advocating.
and they're like striated a certain way and things like that. So in this particular situation, it is up to the land use authority. In the planning commission is the recommending body, and then the city council would be the final decision, but you can make a specific recommendation. Yeah, it's a hard question. What is the right answer? When we met with the developer, they needed time to mull things over as well. And I don't know if they've come to a better, an exact proposal. They were kind of discussing what that should be exactly and I hadn't heard a response as of this. So I'm not sure what they have in mind. But I do think that the residents' feedback needs to be considered in this situation as well.
Right, and I'm not asking you to commit to anything, just obviously, but for what's in the code because of the administrative nature of the decision, right? And it seems as if you're doing your best to work with those residents, but this is, I mean, that's a tough deal. I don't think you'd want to live there. I don't think I would either. I mean, that's what's hard about this. Can you go back to the picture just to make sure I understand what's been agreed to with the shifting of the wall?
Just to add one more thing to what was just mentioned. So in the time between the staff report was written and tonight's meeting, the applicant did submit kind of a proposal to us. We didn't have it, obviously we couldn't get it in the packet because we just got it a few days ago, but the proposal is essentially, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a vinyl fence, 6 feet tall, and it would be up where the curb is, the curb of the drive-throughs. And so that's the proposal, and then there would be a 3-foot, 11-inch retaining wall near or on the property line.
Yeah, and that was actually, so my next question, just to make sure I understand visually, we're talking about shifting that retaining wall, if I'm looking at the picture on my right, to the left, right, closer to the fence, so that we don't have this weird gap.
Correct.
This unmaintainable gap. And then I appreciate your landscape, the laying out of the landscape plan as well. It looks like in addition to, there's landscaping, obviously, that's taking place because, similar to the applicant earlier, you're selling a business, you're selling a property, you want to look good, and so there will be some landscaping perhaps as well in addition to. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're correct. Yeah, the landscaping is designed to be very, very pretty. It's not grass.
Especially with being in the gateway.
Yeah, Ken's heart skipped a little beat when we talked about the gateway overlay, so it's doing its job. It's working well. So I can see that my dumb questions have spurred some additional thoughts from other members of the commission, so I'm going to yield right now and go back to Commissioner Mangum.
Thank you so much. My thoughts are probably dumb as well, but I'm just curious, what are the grading concerns on the south end of the site?
Well, when it's complete, we don't have any grading concerns. I mean, we just need to get the storm drain system in place because it takes care of all the drainage and properly sends it out through the system. Obviously, during construction, before we even leveled these off, it was this whole property sloped one direction that way. And so during those heavy rains and mounds, we did have a little bit of water go into like 2 or 3 of the backyards. And we immediately said, hey, that's not good. We went and addressed it and built that berm currently. But then now the plan is for the landscaping and the storm drain to take care of that.
Great. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, and I did not get a chance to get through all my emails, so I'm glad Austin mentioned it. Here is their proposal for the slope and the retaining wall and then their fence. And I apologize, I hadn't even gotten to that email yet. So, but here it is. So I think this helps the discussion and helps, everybody here with what's being proposed.
There's definitely a little bit of area there as well, which I think is a good thing in the long run, right, on the sloped area. What will be on that sloped area? Is that just proposed to be like rock aggregate?
Do you have a proposal for how that would be landscaped?
We're going to maintain the same landscaping plan. It's just going to be up instead of down in the hole.
And earlier they had, rock beds with plants.
Right, yeah, and that's what I appreciate, as I think the plan is good. Okay, Commissioner Kilgore, thanks for your patience.
No problem. No, so I think now it's really stating the obvious, but I think the discussion is similar to what we did earlier. However, the situation is completely different in that this is administrative and it's also not a master development agreement. And also, I feel that the applicant is, making efforts to really try to mitigate as much as possible the issues that we had discussed about on behalf of the residents. So I do feel like circumstantially or situationally, this is a different discussion, and I don't think we need to make any additional conditions or place any additional burdens, apart from what's already on the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Kilgore. Any other additional questions or comments? Commissioner Wilden?
And I would support what Commissioner Kilgore just said, and because this is different, we really don't have an option of changing it. It is what it is. Is that correct? Yeah, thank you.
We're getting way into civics more than anyone wanted this evening, right? Between administrative and legislative decisions, it's fun stuff. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I will go ahead and make a motion for the Still Ridge Plaza Lot 3, located at 369 East Crossroads Boulevard, for the approval of this multifamily regional commercial project according to the conditions that we have stated on here, 1 through 6. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Mangum. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner Mann. Do we have any additional discussion on the matter? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. And for those residents this evening, we just want to say thank you as well. We appreciate your working with the applicant and also being here to voice your concerns. So thank you for coming tonight and for letting us hear your concerns as well. Thanks. Thanks to the applicant, and thank you, Austin, as well. Okay, we're going to move to item number 4 under our business items. This is Westport Business Park preliminary plat located approximately at 2000 North and Redwood Road. Mark Johnson and Parker Johnson as the applicants.
Good evening, commissioners. The application before you is a preliminary plat. You want to wait a second?
Yeah, if you want to wait just a moment, Gina, thank you. If you don't mind the conversations going to the hallway, would be appreciative. Thank you.
We have the applicant and the property owner here. Mark Johnson is the applicant, Larry Lindstrom is the property owner. The application before you is, again, a preliminary plat in the office warehouse zone. It is at approximately 2000 North Redwood Road. Let's see here. The proposal of this preliminary plat is a 5-lot subdivision on 18.3 acres. And the development requires a trail not only along Redwood Road, but on the east side of the property. So they have landscaping, which I'm only showing you the L101 and L103. I did include all of them in your packet because the landscaping on L102 is in the park strip, which we don't count. They have included those in there, but it doesn't decrease or doesn't go below the 20% required landscaping. So here's the trail. So the easements that one of the conditions of the application that are in the staff report is that the permission or the developer obtain easement permissions from adjacent property owners. So this is a really complex property. It is as you can see on the 11 by 17, what Scott has done is he's just shown the easements and PUEs that are along that east side. Now there is a development agreement, rezone and development agreement for the Westport Business Park, and it states that the trail is required there. And so it really becomes a problem when there's a gap between the canal property and the property border of the development. And so I just wanted to show you this breakdown because at the PUE, at the east side of the PUE is the property line. That's the purple line that goes through there. Then you have several easements. The city has a 30-foot sewer and storm drain easement. And then the canal company, when they were doing construction on the canal, they put a temporary canal or construction easement, which is the slashed lines. And then you have that dotted line, that dotted section, which is the property that has no owner, according to the Utah County records. I'll let Scott answer to the research that he's done in regards to that property. We've contacted the Utah County, title reports and so forth have been, are requested from the county to make sure when did that property become a no man's land. And so Scott has information on that.
So I've gone through the records as best I can, and the applicant has provided additional to help out in ways in areas that I've been missing, but what we've found is everything appears to be easements, and I have been unable to identify where or when or if the land changed ownership. I have been able to identify that the utility easements that the city has were granted by the previous owner of these properties. So it kind of leads to an additional question as to if they signed, did they actually own it? Or where the authorizations came from. The trail that's being proposed here in the no man's area, it appears after conversations with the ULDC Canal Company, it appears that the trail would be outside of what they would consider as their right-of-way, but they claim that they do not have ownership. Their engineer said the Canal Company does not hold ownership. They just operate through easements in general practice. So my research has just led to more questions than answers.
And this is one of the reasons for the condition of this in the staff report is that the developer obtain those easements. I believe Scott has gone through the easement required that the city has for that sewer and storm drain, that 30-foot, which the development agreement does state that it stay within that 30, the trail stay within that 30 feet. However, the trail meanders off the development property more than it is on it. And so that is what staff is recommending, the reason for that condition. It's a very complicated situation. So this is what legal has recommended that we do, is add that condition. With that, staff recommends approval with the findings and conditions of the staff report.
Thank you, Gina, for the presentation. Would the applicant like to add anything to the presentation this evening? If you don't mind stating your name and address.
I'm Mark Johnson with Mustang Design. I've been working with Leisure Villas for probably close to 20 years now, I believe. This is Larry Lindstrom. He is the owner of Villa Finance, which is actually the LLC that is in control of this property. In regards to the trail, my opinion, it's not really that complicated. But there are some things going on that you need to understand, and they might be a little bit difficult to understand. I don't try to interpret those. We've had our title company look at this on several occasions. We've had our land surveyor, who is a registered land surveyor, go through and do an analysis, and I've submitted that analysis to the staff that we've been working with. First of all, to make a clear statement, I guess, there is no man's land in the United States, right? Every piece of land, every foot of land is owned by somebody. And if you go back far enough in a title search, which sometimes is very difficult, you will find out that somebody owns that property. And this was property that was back in the actually 1800s that was managed by the government of the United States, right? And our title people believe that's still the case. They can't just walk away from it. They don't have a lot of interest in it. In a deed, there's 2 deeds that have been recorded in regards to this property. One of those deeds was recorded in 1983. The other deed was recorded in the year 2002. There's an error in one of those deeds. In the analysis that the surveyor did, believes the error was done in the second deed. And it's pretty straightforward. It's easy to understand. The original deed that was done in the 1980s, it gives the description, a meets and bounds description of the canal. And that was deeded to the Utah Lake Distribution Company, which is now the same canal company we're talking about. And it says that there's an easement that follows that land that is 30 feet right of the legal description and 20 feet left. So it's an easement. It's a clear easement written for 50 feet. It also says in the original deed that anything that is not specified in that is also under the control of the Utah Lake Distribution Company. So that means that any of the federal land that is along that corridor is not no man's land. It's actually under the control of the canal company. Now, the canal company doesn't even fully realize that. They understand they have an easement. The easement that was recorded in 2002 also follows the same meets and bounds description, but instead of using left and right, it uses the terms east and west. Now, the canal road is on the west side of the canal. So it makes sense if you have a 30-foot easement on one side and a 20-foot easement on the other. One of those, the longer easement, would contain that road. That was the intent, and that's the clear intent in the document that was recorded in 1980. The analysis by the surveyor says he believes that in the interpretation of that and the rewriting of that, as you go along that meets and bounds direction, there was a misunderstanding of what the left and right was. So his analysis is it's a 50-foot easement, 30 feet west of the canal, and 20 feet east of the canal, which is different from the document in 2020. Irregardless of that, our concern on this has been all along is we did enter in some discussions about building the trail early on in this project, and I mean very early on in this project. We've had this project, we've been working on it for close to 4 years now. In the earlier discussions with staff, the construction of the trail came up. We got into a discussion about it being an exaction because this is not a system, this trail will not be used by my client. He wants to fence it so nobody using the trail can get into his property because of the type of uses that he has there. There'll be vehicles parked there, there'll be equipment, there'll be trucks parked along this trail, and it's security reasons. My client had determined at that time and had offered to go ahead and build an 8-foot trail along the sides to go in and out of his property line. So it was written in the developer's agreement, and it says developers shall also install trail improvements that will follow the existing sewer and storm drain pipeline alignments located west of the existing canal maintenance road. Developers shall improve the landscaping of the trail along the canal in accordance with the city regulations, notwithstanding the above installation of the canal trail shall be subject to the city obtaining the necessary easements, authorizations, and permissions in writing from both the Utah Lake Distribution Company and the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District to construct portions of this trail. Now, it's not the Jordan. My client will build the trail if the city gets permission for us to build that. I've had a number of conversations with the canal company. I know the past president and the current president very well. I've engaged them. We have, because the city has not got those permissions, I have asked to be on their agenda, the exaction argument to do it if we got those permissions.
And the city's put in very little effort to get these permissions. They haven't asked to go to a meeting or anything.
But we're happy to do that. We'll take care of that. We'll try to get this thing done. But we can't move the trail. The agreement is to follow the line where it's at, and that is, it meanders in and outside my client's property.